Hi, biology students. We are beginning semester two. And in semester two, we're going to start with chapter 10, which is the principles of evolution. We're going to do two sections today. And those two sections, the first one's going to be a little bit about the early ideas of evolution and how there were some changes biologically and geologically before Charles Darwin. And then section two is going to talk about Charles Darwin and his observations that he made when he took a voyage to the Galapagos Islands. So let's go ahead and get started. So early scientists proposed ideas about evolution. So these geologic changes kind of set the stage for Charles Darwin's different theories. Here is a good word to make sure that you have written down. Both these bullet points. Evolution. What is evolution? You'll have to know this for the test, for the final. You have to know what evolution is. It's the biological change process by which descendants come to differ from their ancestors. So it's been discussed for more than really 100 years when Darwin kind of proposed this theory of evolution and how it works. So it's the change process by which descendants come to differ from our ancestors, humans, animals, so on. And a species, I think discussed this early on in chapter 1, when we talked about the characteristics of life. A species is a group of organisms that can reproduce and have fertile offspring. Make sure you have those two words and their definitions down. So there were some important naturalists before Charles Darwin's time that kind of set the stage. So not necessarily something you're going to be tested on. It's not really a power standard, but it's good to know some of these people. So Linnaeus, he kind of worked up this classification system from kingdom to species. So he identified different organisms and put them into different groups. Buffon, he believed that species shared ancestors rather than arising separately. So he rejected kind of that idea that Earth was only 6,000 years old. He believed it was a lot older, and he believed that we have shared ancestors among each other. So as these naturalists kind of came up with these new and differing ideas, it kind of, like I said earlier, set the stage for Charles Darwin. Erasmus Darwin, he had more complex forms developed. He believed that organisms were more complex, and all organisms really evolved towards perfection and complexity. And then finally, Lamarck, he believed that environmental changes led to the use or disuse of a structure. So depending on the environment that you lived in, are you going to use a tail more or less? And so if obviously that environment led to an organism using that tail more or less, depending on what that environment looked like. These three things you need to make sure that you have written down. I just need to know, okay. Catastrophism, gradualism, and uniformitarianism. These are three theories of geologic change. Catastrophism is obviously what the word states. It states that natural disasters such as floods and volcanic eruptions have happened often during Earth's long history. So these catastrophes have shaped the land. That was kind of the first theory that many naturalists thought of. Then later on, gradualism came into the picture. So this theory, he said that, James Hutton, the guy that kind of proposed this idea of gradualism, said that so canyons and changes in Earth's surface resulted from slow processes that had happened in the past. So obviously catastrophism is quick, gradualism is very, very slow. And then finally, uniformitarianism, which is the process that is presented today. This theory states that geologic processes that shape Earth are uniform through time. So every layer of rock was formed by the uniform laying down of sediment that still occurs today. So uniformitarian is the prevailing theory of geologic change. These geologic changes over time, these things that scientists believed about organisms and stated, set the stage for Charles Darwin. Which brings us to 10.2. So Charles Darwin took a voyage to the Galapagos Islands, and he did his research and looked at the different animals that were on the island. Here's the first word you need to make sure you have written down for 10.2. Variation is a difference in physical traits. So he made observations that's basically that Galapagos tortoises that lived in areas with tall plants had longer necks and legs versus those that were short shrubbery. They had the shorter legs and the shorter necks. Those are variations. He also looked at finches. He's really most known for finches, the Galapagos finches. Those finches that live in areas with hard-shelled nuts are going to have shorter, stronger beaks. Those that have like long curved beaks tend to live in areas where there are flowers that they have to reach in their beaks, reach far down to get the nectar or the food that they need. So all these were observations that he made, and he looked at the varying traits between tortoises on the island and finches on the island. And he realized that adaptations were occurring in these animals. And an adaptation, write this down, is a feature that allows an organism to better survive in its environment. So if an organism, say a finch, lives where there are hard-shelled nuts and they don't have a short, strong beak, but they have a long, curvy one, are they going to adapt to the environment that they live in? That depends. If they're able to adapt, then they're able to really survive. If they can adapt, they're probably going to die out. So adaptations can lead to genetic changes in a population. So over time, if those beaks hold up and the food gets eaten by those strong beaks, you're going to see more of those types of beaks. Charles Darwin also observed fossils and geologic evidence supporting ancient Earth. So he believed, what scientist was it? Buffon. He believed that the world was older than 6,000 years. So he found fossils of extinct animals that resembled modern animals today. He found supposedly, he said there was an earthquake on the island, and he saw how the earth shook and how the island raised up. And so he saw fossil shells high up in the Andes Mountain and realized how the earth has changed and the animals have to adapt to the earth and the environment changing. Otherwise, they are not going to survive. So kind of same thing there. I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but Darwin observed an earthquake on the island, and he basically saw how the earth shifted and moved and how underwater became above sea level after that earthquake, and he observed and made those observations as well. So Charles Darwin basically is the guy that kind of came up with this idea, and he gave evidence for evolution. And now you guys are going to watch a video on what he saw and the traits and the variations and the different organisms that he saw. And we're just going to go along on a video trip with him right now. So make sure you have all the notes written, all the words, the definitions that I suggested, and ask questions if you have them.